Well, thank you all for joining me today. We are in this session, we're going to explore how using Teams is a great way to improve focus and engagement with your audience. Hopefully, they'll put their phones down. And it's also a great way to evaluate how you're doing, to get a little feedback and just make sure you're connecting with the folks you're there with. And ultimately, it can be more fun for you and your participants if everyone's got some interaction and engagement in the presentation. Basically, Teams and Zoom offer some internal polling options, and we'll also look at some third-party options. But I will say up front, Zoom does require a paid account. So that's going to limit the number of folks that can use that functionality, and I'll address that just a little later on. Today's presenter is Mark Chamberlain, myself, and I am with T&E Campus in the Department of Instructional Design and Training. And this is my email address in case you want to contact me or follow up with a question. I'll be glad to help if I can. Training is a part of my work and it is a part of my life. And one of us pictured here is well trained and obedient. I will leave it up to you who is. All right. Well, let's do a little polling. If you will, and I need, pardon me, I'm going to have to jump out of here for just a second. If you'll look in your chat window, well, now it's not letting me reopen it. Why is this? Okay, I had to go backwards a little bit. All right, I cannot, well, let me see if I can switch my share. I apologize, Teams is reluctant to let me show you what the presenter sees, but where you in the chat window hopefully see a poll about asking you how are you feeling today, and you can click a radio button and then submit. Mine also shows how you can start and stop the polls, export results, and so on and so forth. But you, as a presenter, you'll see that when you're in there. So if we have anyone that's ready to submit, go ahead and give us a result. Well, there comes a response. And let's see here. Alrighty, I guess we have some reluctant responders today. I'm going to have to say that maybe some of them are unhappy or sad. If there were, you would see that result there in the chat window. Okay. Well, actually, I did have a screenshot here for you. So you'll see the poll listed there on the right-hand side, and you would see the results there. And just below, so down here we have some menu choices, and the start and stop the poll is what the presenter would see, and export questions, that sort of thing. So we could have you could reuse this if needed to be. So moving right along. Steps to good polling start with very simple. If nothing else, just seeing the complication that the struggle we had here just to launch this poll and to be able to share the information we wanted to. You don't want to start off with something really complicated. You want to get right into something easy for everyone to understand the directions, where they're supposed to be, and you want to do it early in the presentation. If we wait until toward the end, people haven't had time to get acclimated and work through their bugs and that sort of thing. Now, here in Teams, just directing people to the chat windows are pretty simple things. The instructions are not real detailed there. But as we'll see in the third-party products, those do require extra steps and have extra options. So instructions are going to be very critical here. Excuse me. We want basically the point of all that is to ensure success before you poll for anything important. Not that asking people about their feelings isn't important, but if you're trying to really understand people's learning and understanding and what the kinds of things they need help with, then you want to get some of the easy stuff out of the way in your poll. And like learners everywhere, we all need room to make mistakes, we need to practice, and we need to have some level of success before we can really be comfortable and really ready to get to work. So get in a good, simple poll, make sure everybody understands how to do it, and move forward from there. Now, Polls and Teams is based on the Forms app, and the Forms app is a part of Office 365. And if you're utilizing Teams, you will find all the apps here. I'm pointing to this area over here. When you're inside the Teams itself, I tell you, I do recommend though that not only. So what I was just explaining was that the Forms app, if you've used it before, you'll probably see it in your list of ready tools. But I wanted to point out that when you're trying to set up a poll and you want to access the Forms app, you want to be sure that you're at least in the edit mode of the meeting that you want to create a poll for. Now, if you're in something else, you'll be able to use the Forms app within that tool, but it won't show up in the meeting that you want to use. So be sure you're in the editing feature, or you're creating a brand new meeting when you access this. And the way to access that is to tap the apps button there on the lower left-hand side, search for the word Forms, and in Forms and a whole lot of other things will probably pop up in a long list of things that are available to you. And then, excuse me. Well, I just said that inside Teams we can choose or search for Forms. The other thing that's kind of funny about this is there's well, it comes up in the next slide. There are numerous opportunities to confirm that you're wanting to use Forms, and it'll ask you, is this what you want to use, and click Save, and you always just click Yes and move on. It's a little odd there to me that way that works. In backing up and assuming you're a little bit of an experienced user, if you already have existing polls, you can find those by clicking on the More menu, and you see some polls listed down here. Of course, they just say polls. We probably need to name them, but nevertheless, and if you don't have polls created, then you clicking the plus icon here takes us to the next step. And this is the example I'm talking about. The next step is, so do you want to do this in Forms? And of course, the answer is yes. That's kind of where we were. So you click it and you'll move on. And that brings up your first poll question. So typing in the question, I've done that already, and I've put in some possible answers. And you do have a number of choices here. For example, do you want people to be able to give multiple answers? Maybe multiple makes sense. The other is whether you want to share the results live while it's all going on. And most of the time, I think that makes sense, but you may want to hold back. I know sometimes in a classroom setting, you might want everyone to give their answer before you share all the answers. But there are many of these things, especially when you're asking people how they're feeling or where they're from and that kind of thing, then there's no reason not to give those live. Keeping on the responses anonymous. Actually, you really don't even see the names are not really associated with this in the poll. It's during the poll, but when you go to export the results, if people need anonymity there, just go ahead and check this. And allowing others to co-author, that would be an advanced user step. So we'll let that go. At any rate, click Save, and we move on. Once your polls start to be produced, then they kind of accumulate in one area. Nice feature here is that you can see all these polls, and I just kind of cropped this down to a couple, and you can launch them from right here. You could be right inside this, or you can go back and edit, or you can delete. So this part's not terribly unfamiliar, I think, for a lot of folks. But this is where you can continue to manage the polls you have, especially if you have several, and work from there. Launch and delete. Now, if you get to your presentation and inside Teams, this would be the top row with all the various feature buttons. If you didn't happen to see this little Forms icon, it just seems like it's missing. You can check the triple ellipsis dot menu here and add an app. And adding an app gives you the choice to add the form menus that icons that are missing. So if your polls just don't seem to be populating there for some reason or another, it's just another way to get to the same place. So in this case, they're going to present in the chat window, and you can directly manage them from there. You can click on each one if you've got them in a sequential order, And here again is kind of what it looks like for the viewer to pick their answer and submit. And then, of course, then the responses are down here and that sort of thing. So before I get too carried away, are there any questions? I may have gone through that quickly, but it's fairly straightforward stuff. It is something that's good to practice. So looking ahead to Zoom, the more I work with this, I realized, well, for one, we use Teams, so I don't have a Zoom account at work except for one that I just applied for, a free one to have small meetings and that sort of thing. But those free accounts do not offer the poll features. You do have to have a paid account. It's not terribly expensive. And I do find this, as I learn about how to use the Zoom polls, probably is a little simpler. You don't have to navigate back and forth between forms and teams and all that sort of thing. So I think they've streamlined that a little bit, but it does that with that paid account. It's not free, and I'm trying to focus on some things that people can do without putting a lot of money into it and still have some good information. So Teams users, I think, are in good shape. It's not terribly hard, but it does require that. I will say that, and you can search this, or you can click the link later if you want to. I'll share the presentation, but using Zoom polls, demos, and tips by Kat Mullivill, I'll get that right in a minute, was a really simple, straightforward, well-presented demo. And if you really wanted to pay for the account and do all that, certainly could do that. And honestly, it's not hard to learn, but that was just I really liked that one, and I felt like that's a good one to share with folks. But for a free option, I'm going to demo Poll Everywhere. We do have a link here to Poll Everywhere as well. And I would just say that when it comes to third-party apps, there are lots of polling products, and like the venerable SurveyMonkey, which is, as far as I can remember, was the original. VoxVote is also a really good one that I've used, and I think a lot of folks have. Google Forms. So those are just probably 3 of 1,000 possibilities out there. There really are a lot, but it's just a question of getting to know each one of them. Poll Everywhere is a very robust product. It is pretty easy to use, and it's also very mobile friendly. So all you really need is a cell phone and a text app to participate in the polls. So if you get people that are just listening or watching on a very small screen, they can use the texting features to do that. So, and to get to Poll Everywhere, you spellitallout.com, and you can go and create an account in just 2 or 3 clicks. It's really as simple. If you do have an account, we're going to go straight to activities. From activities, you'll see that number one, and I have not found this in Teams, maybe I've just missed it, but Poll Everywhere lets you create folders. So if you're doing a lot of presentations, you may want to group your polls in folders to keep everything organized. Otherwise, you start to get a long list like I'm beginning to get here. And some of those polls may be very similar, but if you're going to make them real specific to the presentation, you may want to organize them that way. But from here, you can activate a poll right there on the spot and just make it live and ready to go. Or you can use the stacked dots, and you can get the copy response link. I'll show you another way to utilize Poll Everywhere, but you can just simply send people links so that they can access the place to response. You can also send them a link to see the responses, so that if they need a separate window for some reason or another. And of course, you can also edit. So again, this is pretty straightforward. I think most people would navigate it pretty simply. But if you haven't created any polls, just click the activity button and a new poll begins. And this is something I like a little bit more about Poll Everywhere. You've got multiple choice questions, which would be question, answer, and as many answers as you need. But there's also word cloud. And if you've used that in other polls, it's a nice way to let people just kind of give their own random feedback about a topic. I like to ask people where they're from in a lot of polls. And so, you'll see all kinds of names from all parts of the state and sometimes even the globe. So the word cloud is a neat thing. And the more people that respond with the same thing, the larger the word becomes. So that's the visual on that. The Q&A thing and the clickable image. Oh, didn't need to click that image. I was just going to tell you about it. Oh, no, that wasn't supposed to happen. Let's go back one. If you've got a map or even a graphic and you want to highlight certain or put points on that image and ask questions, people can click on those points to give their answer. So the classic example is a map of the United States. If you want to find certain states or regions or whatever, and you ask questions like, where would you expect to find a desert? Out there in Nevada and Arizona might be a good place to click. So you can utilize that. Just general survey, open-ended. And I have to admit, I have not tried out competition. Probably worth a look to see what that does. But again, figure out the type of poll you want to do, give it a title, which is really the question, answers, and click create down here. And before you launch the poll, once you've clicked on it back at that earlier screen where we had all the list of polls and you wanted to, you simply open the poll that you're dealing with. And this would be the poll itself. It's generally what it's going to look like without all these buttons over here. And it's also going to give the instructions on how to respond. You can either go to a web page or you can text to this number and enter the name of the user. And in my case, my name is mchamberl665. So everything revolves around that. Right, back channelers. This configure button is probably the most important of these tabs. All of this actually comes up by default. You could change it if there was a reason to, but all this kind of information is what you want here. Audience restrictions. Actually, I should have put together a slide on that, and I see that I didn't. You can limit the number of times people can respond, especially if you just want to, you want to hear from them once. And not just keep putting in answers or something like that. Or you can give them multiples. It does warn you, and I think rightfully so. If one person just keeps responding over and over and over, it kind of throws off the poll, to say the least. So that's a good thing to consider. But, again, this is all tabbed menus. Just kind of scroll through it, check out the points that are important to you. You can even go back and look at the response history and export results and things like that, or you can delete the poll. But the thing I want to show you today is how you can use Poll Everywhere for PowerPoint. And basically, you're building in sort of an extension of Poll Everywhere to have a menu right there in PowerPoint, and you can create new polls, you can insert the polls you've already created, or you can edit them. So you've got some good options there. What you want to do is either search Poll Everywhere for PowerPoint, Windows, or Mac, and download that. I will say you probably want to start a pot of coffee because while the download it's kind of a large download, it'll probably go quickly, but the install took much longer than I expected. So everything was fine once we got underway, but that was a situation to deal with. And once you click on one of these options, then it brings up this list of my activities, which should look very familiar since that's what we just looked at earlier. So again, same options. You don't have to be in the Poll Everywhere website to do this. Now you've brought it inside PowerPoint, and everything is just within a few clicks of your work there. So if we didn't see this, I was pointing out that you can install this, and then you have the tools under this under the ribbon for Poll Everywhere. Now you've got all the same tools and access to the program itself. And what I was going to share with you is that when you're creating a poll and you're ready to share it, you don't see the poll go live. Let's see, let me make sure this one is live. Yeah, it is. Okay. So I'm going to go up to my display settings and I'm going to swap presenter view. All right. And in doing so, now we're seeing the live response. So if anyone would like to text to 37607 and type in the word Mark Chamber L665, and you do that once to join, and then you can choose A, B, C, or D for your response, or you can go to pollev.com/Mark Chamber L665, and you'll see a page that looks like this. All right. We're starting to get multiple responses. Good. I missed an opportunity. Another thing you can do, well, I showed this in the, of course, we can put the link in the chat window for everyone. And as I mentioned earlier, you can also, you can put in the, you can generate a response link that you can also type into the chat window. So people, if anyone's having trouble accessing that, the first link will let you submit a response and the second link will let you see the response. And then if I switch presentation views, then that's another way to share that with you folks. So at this point, I see from my poll, there's actually a range of things that people would benefit from. We're actually kind of through our time. I'd be glad to go through any one of these that would be helpful. Let me stop presenting there. Okay. Well, and I know things like this, it's easy to go fast, and we're looking at 3 different ways to do the same thing. So, but I wanted to put together, there are options is really what it comes down to. Teams has a good built-in process. Zoom does as well. It does cost a little bit to get involved in that. And then products like Poll Everywhere, while they have a little bit more complication, they also offer a little more flexibility. I think, what's in Teams is great, but, you are sort of limited by the chat window. Whereas with Poll Everywhere, there's so many ways to present that information and on a much larger screen. So I think it just depends on what people are looking for and how they want to use it, and whether they just want to get a few responses and keep moving, or do you want to really share or show something that's dramatic in that sense, like the clickable map, for example. I thought that's one of my favorite features there. All right. Well, thank you all for joining me. And certainly, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to mchamberlain@tbr.edu.